The folded flag arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in September, delivered by two Marines in dress blues who stood on Erica Strong's front porch with the kind of careful composure that comes from delivering news that destroys lives. The formal letter that accompanied the flag was brief, clinical, and devastating. "We regret to inform you that your son, Staff Sergeant Marcus Strong, was killed in action during a classified operation. We extend our deepest condolences for your loss." Erica stared at the words until they blurred together, her 59-year-old hands trembling as she tried to make sense of language that seemed impossible to apply to her son. Marcus was 26 years old, a Special Forces medic who had called her just 3 weeks earlier from somewhere he could not name, telling her about the Afghan children he was treating and the medical supplies his unit desperately needed. The Marines waited patiently while she read the letter twice, then offered to explain the benefits she would receive as the mother of a fallen soldier. But Erica was not listening to their words about survivor compensation and burial allowances. If you enjoy our stories and want to support our channel, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow. Now, let's return to our story. She was focused on what they were not telling her. There were no details about how Marcus had died, no information about when his body would be returned for burial, no explanation of why a routine medical mission had become a casualty-producing operation. The letter mentioned a classified operation, but provided no context, no timeline, no specific location beyond the general theater of operations. "When will I get my son back?" Erica asked, interrupting the Marine sergeant's explanation of military death benefits. "When can I bury him?" The two Marines exchanged a glance that Erica would remember for years, a momentary hesitation that suggested they were not prepared for this particular question. "Ma'am," the sergeant said carefully, "Staff Sergeant Strong's remains were not recoverable due to the nature of the incident and the security situation in the area of operations. The Army will continue to monitor the situation, but at this time, there is no timeline for recovery operations." The words hit Erica like a physical blow. Not only was her son dead, but his body was lost somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, presumably destroyed beyond recognition or recovery. She would never have a grave to visit, never have a funeral where she could say goodbye, never have the closure that comes from laying a child to rest. The Marines left after providing her with contact information for casualty assistance officers and grief counseling services. They took their formal condolences and their carefully rehearsed explanations, leaving Erica alone in her living room with a folded American flag and a letter that raised more questions than it answered. That night, Erica spread the contents of the notification packet across her kitchen table and began the process that would consume the next 4 years of her life. She read every document multiple times, studying the careful language that military bureaucrats use to describe tragedy without revealing details that might compromise operational security or ongoing missions. The death certificate listed Marcus's cause of death as killed in action, with no additional medical information. The incident report was heavily redacted, with entire paragraphs blacked out and only basic information visible: date, general location, unit designation. Even Marcus's service record, which should have been available to his next of kin, contained gaps in classifications that prevented Erica from understanding what her son had been doing in the weeks before his death. Erica had worked as a paralegal for 23 years before Marcus was born, and she understood how bureaucratic systems operated. She knew that the level of classification surrounding her son's death was unusual for a medical specialist who was supposed to be providing humanitarian aid rather than engaging in direct combat operations. Special Forces medics certainly faced danger, but the complete blackout of information suggested something more complex than a routine casualty. She began making phone calls the next morning, starting with the casualty assistance officer who had been assigned to help her navigate the military's death notification process. Captain Rodriguez was sympathetic and professional, but he had no additional information beyond what was contained in the official notification packet. "Mrs. Strong," he explained during their first phone conversation, "I understand your need for more details about your son's death, but the operation he was involved in remains classified at levels that prevent me from accessing additional information. Even if I could obtain more details, I would not be authorized to share them with family members." Erica escalated her requests through the military chain of command, writing letters to Marcus's commanding officers, to Pentagon officials, to members of Congress who served on defense committees. The responses were uniformly polite and uniformly unhelpful. Expressions of sympathy combined with explanations about operational security requirements that prevented the disclosure of information about classified missions. After 6 months of official stonewalling, Erica hired a lawyer who specialized in military affairs and Freedom of Information Act requests. Jonathan Walsh had represented dozens of military families seeking information about loved ones who had died in classified operations, and he warned Erica that the process would be lengthy, expensive, and might ultimately yield very little additional information. The military has broad authority to classify information related to special operations, Walsh explained during their initial consultation. Even basic details about casualties can be withheld if officials determine that disclosure might compromise ongoing missions or reveal tactics and capabilities to enemy forces. But Walsh also told Erica something that crystallized her growing suspicions about the official account of Marcus's death. "In my experience," he said, "the level of classification surrounding your son's death is unusually extensive. Most KIA notifications, even for special operations personnel, include more specific information about circumstances and timeline. The complete blackout suggests either an extremely sensitive operation or a situation where the military is not certain about what actually happened." That phrase, "not certain about what actually happened," would haunt Erica for months. It implied the possibility that Marcus's death was not the clear-cut combat casualty that officials had described, that there might be ambiguity or uncertainty about his fate that the military was not willing to acknowledge publicly. Erica's Freedom of Information Act requests yielded heavily redacted documents that raised more questions than they answered. She learned that Marcus had been part of a joint operation involving multiple units and agencies, that the mission had been planned for months in advance, and that it had gone wrong in ways that required extensive after-action reviews and investigations. But she also learned something else that military officials had not mentioned in their initial notification. Marcus was listed as missing in action for nearly 2 weeks before his status was changed to killed in action. During those 2 weeks, search and rescue operations had been conducted, air assets had been deployed, and intelligence resources had been dedicated to locating him and other missing personnel. The transition from MIA to KIA had occurred not because his body was found and identified, but because officials had determined that survival was no longer possible given the circumstances of the incident and the amount of time that had elapsed. In other words, Marcus had been declared dead based on probability rather than physical evidence. This discovery transformed Erica's grief into something more complex and more determined. She was no longer simply a mother mourning her son's death. She was a mother questioning whether her son was actually dead at all. The possibility that Marcus might still be alive, that he might be injured or captured or lost somewhere in the vast complexity of the Afghan conflict, became an obsession that drove Erica to extraordinary lengths. She learned about prisoner of war protocols, about military search and rescue procedures, about the politics and geography of Afghanistan in ways that no grieving mother should have to understand. She contacted veterans organizations, missing person advocacy groups, and families of other service members who had been declared dead without recovered remains. She discovered a network of people who shared her suspicions about the military's casualty reporting systems, who believed that some soldiers declared KIA might actually be missing or captured. Most significantly, she discovered that she was not alone in questioning the official account of the operation that had allegedly killed her son. Other families had received similar notifications about the same classified mission, and their questions were being met with the same official silence that Erica encountered. Together, these families began piecing together fragments of information about an operation that had gone catastrophically wrong, about multiple casualties and missing personnel, about a level of official secrecy that seemed disproportionate to the military's usual handling of special operations casualties. For years after receiving the folded flag and the formal letter of condolence, Erica Strong was no longer the grief-stricken mother who had accepted the military's explanation of her son's death. She had become an investigator, an advocate, and a woman who refused to let bureaucratic classifications prevent her from learning the truth about what had happened to Marcus. She kept the folded flag in a place of honor in her living room, but she no longer thought of it as a memorial to her son's death. She thought of it as evidence in an ongoing investigation, a reminder that some truths are too important to be buried under official secrecy and classified documents. The search for Marcus Strong was far from over. For years of investigation had taught Erica Strong that the truth about her son's fate lay hidden behind layers of military bureaucracy, medical privacy laws, and national security classifications that seemed designed to prevent families from asking uncomfortable questions. But it had also taught her that persistence could sometimes crack even the most carefully constructed walls of official silence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former Army medic named David Chun who had served in Marcus's unit during the operation that had allegedly killed her son. Chun had been medically discharged 2 years earlier after suffering traumatic brain injury from an IED explosion, and his struggle with Veterans Affairs bureaucracy had left him bitter about the military's treatment of wounded soldiers. When Chun contacted Erica through a veterans advocacy website, he was careful to avoid discussing classified details about the operation. But he was willing to share something that military officials had never mentioned in their sanitized reports. Marcus had not been killed instantly in the incident that had been described to his family. "Your son was alive when we evacuated him," Chun told Erica during a phone conversation that she recorded with his permission. "Unconscious, critically injured, but alive. I was the medic who worked on him during the helicopter flight to the field hospital. He had massive head trauma, but he was breathing on his own. His heart was beating. I have seen dead soldiers, Mrs. Strong. Your son was not dead when I last saw him." This revelation shattered everything Erica thought she knew about Marcus's death. If he had survived the initial incident long enough to be evacuated to a medical facility, why had the family been told he was killed in action? What had happened during or after his medical treatment that had led to his official death designation? Chun provided Erica with the name of the field hospital where Marcus had been taken, a classified medical facility that treated the most severely wounded special operations personnel. He also gave her the names of other medical staff who had been involved in Marcus's treatment, though he warned that most of them would be bound by medical privacy laws and military security protocols that prevented them from discussing specific patients. Armed with this new information, Erica's lawyer filed additional Freedom of Information Act requests seeking Marcus's medical records from the field hospital. The military's response was swift and decisive. All medical records related to the operation remained classified for national security reasons, and no information could be released to family members without official authorization that would not be granted. But the military's refusal to release medical records only confirmed what Chun had told Erica. Marcus had survived long enough to receive medical treatment, which meant there should be documentation of his condition, his treatment, and his ultimate disposition. The fact that such records existed but were being withheld suggested that the official account of his death was, at best, incomplete. Erica began reaching out to the other medical personnel Chun had identified, using social media, professional networks, and veterans organizations to locate people who might have information about her son's treatment. Most of the contacts led nowhere. Former military medical staff who were unwilling to discuss classified operations or who had been transferred to other assignments and could not be located. But one contact led to another breakthrough that changed the direction of Erica's investigation entirely. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been the neurosurgeon at the field hospital who had operated on Marcus following his evacuation from the battlefield. She had left military service 6 months after the operation and was now working at a civilian trauma center in San Diego. When Erica contacted her, Dr. Martinez was initially reluctant to discuss any details about her military service. "I cannot talk about specific patients or operations," Dr. Martinez explained during their first phone conversation. "Medical privacy laws and my military security clearance prevent me from discussing classified treatments." But Dr. Martinez was willing to discuss something else that proved even more significant: the existence of a specialized medical program for treating severe traumatic brain injuries in special operations personnel. The program involved experimental treatments, extended rehabilitation, and in some cases, the placement of soldiers in long-term care facilities that operated outside the normal military medical system. Sometimes, Dr. Martinez said carefully, soldiers who are critically injured in classified operations require specialized care that cannot be provided through normal military channels. There are facilities that specialize in treating patients whose injuries are so severe that they cannot return to duty, but whose cases are so sensitive that they cannot be transferred to civilian care. She could not say whether Marcus had been enrolled in such a program, but she confirmed that the types of injuries Chun had described, massive head trauma resulting in extended unconsciousness, were exactly the kind of cases that might require specialized long-term treatment. This led Erica to a new line of investigation that had never occurred to her during 4 years of fighting with military bureaucracy. Instead of trying to prove that Marcus had died in a classified operation, she began trying to prove that he was alive in a classified medical facility. The challenge was that such facilities, if they existed, would be even more heavily classified than the military operations that had produced their patients. Soldiers who required long-term care for catastrophic injuries sustained in secret missions could not be treated in normal military hospitals, where their presence might compromise operational security or reveal details about classified activities. Erica hired a private investigator who specialized in locating missing persons and had experience working with military families. Rebecca Torres was a former Air Force intelligence officer who understood how military classification systems worked and how information could be hidden even from family members who had legal rights to know about their loved one's status. If your son is alive and receiving long-term medical care, Torres explained during their initial meeting, he would be in a facility that officially does not exist. The patients would have no contact with family members, no access to outside communication, no legal advocates who might question their treatment or detention. Torres began mapping the network of private medical facilities that contracted with the Department of Defense to provide specialized care for military personnel. Many of these facilities were located in remote areas and operated under strict security protocols that prevented public access or oversight. The investigation was painstaking and expensive, involving record searches, surveillance of potential facilities, and careful inquiries that had to be conducted without alerting military officials to Erica's new line of investigation. After 18 months of work, Torres had identified 7 facilities that fit the profile of what they were looking for: remote, heavily secured, with no public information about their patient populations or treatment programs. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source: a maintenance worker at a facility in rural Montana who recognized Marcus's photograph from a missing person inquiry that Torres had distributed. The worker, who was bound by strict confidentiality agreements, was unwilling to provide direct confirmation that Marcus was a patient at the facility. But he was willing to share information that suggested Erica was on the right track. "There are patients here who have been here for years," the worker told Torres during a carefully arranged meeting. "Soldiers who were injured in places they cannot talk about, receiving treatment for injuries that officially did not happen. Their families think they are dead because that is what the families were told." The worker described a facility that housed approximately 30 patients, all special operations personnel who had suffered catastrophic injuries that prevented them from returning to duty or civilian life. The patients received excellent medical care, but they had no contact with the outside world and no legal representation to advocate for their rights or challenge their indefinite detention. "Some of them do not even remember who they are," the worker continued. "Brain injuries, memory loss, psychological trauma. They have been here so long that this place is all they know. They do not remember their families, their lives before they were injured. As far as they know, this is where they have always been." This description matched exactly what Dr. Martinez had told Erica about the types of specialized care required for severe traumatic brain injury cases. Soldiers with such injuries might require years of treatment and rehabilitation, and their memory problems could make them incapable of requesting contact with family members or questioning their medical detention. Armed with this information, Erica made a decision that would have seemed impossible when she first received the folded flag and the official notification of Marcus's death. She was going to Montana to find her son. The facility was located in a remote valley surrounded by mountains, accessible only by a single road that was monitored by security cameras and guarded checkpoints. The official designation was Pine Valley Rehabilitation Center, and public records listed it as a private medical facility that specialized in treating veterans with severe disabilities. But the level of security surrounding the facility, armed guards, electronic fences, communication jamming equipment, suggested something far more significant than a normal rehabilitation center. This was a place designed to keep people in as much as to keep unwanted visitors out. Erica spent 3 days conducting surveillance of the facility from concealed positions in the surrounding mountains, using binoculars and telephoto lenses to observe the daily routines of staff and patients. What she saw confirmed her worst fears and her greatest hopes. Men in hospital clothing walking in supervised groups, clearly patients receiving some form of medical care, but also clearly not free to leave the facility or communicate with the outside world. On the 3rd day of surveillance, Erica saw something that stopped her heart: a tall, thin man with dark hair walking with a group of other patients near the facility's exercise area. Even at a distance, even after 5 years of uncertainty and grief, she recognized the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the profile that she had memorized during 26 years of motherhood. Marcus Strong was alive. Her son, who had been declared killed in action and officially buried under a military headstone in Arlington National Cemetery, was walking around a secret medical facility in Montana, apparently unaware that his family believed him to be dead. The relief and rage that flooded through Erica in that moment were almost overwhelming. Relief that her instincts had been correct, that 5 years of investigation and questioning had led her to the truth. Rage that military officials had allowed her to grieve for a son who was alive, had allowed her to bury an empty coffin while Marcus was being held in medical detention without any contact with his family. But the greater challenge lay ahead. Even if she could prove that Marcus was alive and being held at the facility, she would still need to find a way to secure his release and reunion with his family. And given the level of secrecy surrounding his detention, that might prove to be even more difficult than locating him had been. Erica returned to her hotel that night and began planning the next phase of her mission, not just finding her son, but bringing him home. The legal battle to secure Marcus's release from Pine Valley Rehabilitation Center consumed 18 months of Erica's life and nearly bankrupted her in the process. Military officials denied that Marcus was being held at the facility, denied that the facility had any relationship with the Department of Defense, and claimed that Erica's surveillance photographs showed someone who merely resembled her son. But Erica had allies now. The story of her 5-year search for a son the military had declared dead had attracted national media attention, and investigative journalists began asking uncomfortable questions about secret medical facilities and the treatment of special operations personnel who had been injured in classified missions. Rebecca Torres, the private investigator who had helped locate Marcus, used her intelligence background to gather additional evidence about the facility's operations. Financial records showed payments from Pentagon black budget accounts. Employment records revealed that staff members had security clearances that were inappropriate for a normal rehabilitation center. Medical supply orders included equipment used for treating traumatic brain injuries and managing patients with severe memory loss. The breakthrough came when Dr. Sarah Martinez, the neurosurgeon who had operated on Marcus at the field hospital, agreed to testify about the military's use of secret medical facilities to warehouse soldiers whose injuries made them inconvenient witnesses to classified operations. These men gave everything for their country, Dr. Martinez told a congressional oversight committee during televised hearings that brought national attention to Erica's case. They survived injuries that should have killed them, and instead of being honored for their sacrifice, they have been disappeared into a system that treats them like classified documents rather than human beings. The political pressure generated by the hearings, combined with the threat of additional media investigation, finally forced military officials to acknowledge what Erica had suspected for years. Marcus Strong was alive, had been receiving medical treatment for severe traumatic brain injury, and had been classified as deceased in official records to protect operational security surrounding the mission that had injured him. But the official acknowledgement came with devastating news that Erica was not prepared to hear. Marcus's brain injury had been so severe that he had no memory of his life before the incident. He did not remember his military service, his family, or any of the experiences that had shaped his identity for 26 years. As far as Marcus was concerned, his life had begun when he awakened in a medical facility with no past and no understanding of why he was there. The patient has severe retrograde amnesia, explained Dr. Patricia Wells, the psychiatrist who had been treating Marcus for the past 5 years. He has no recollection of events prior to his injury, and attempts to restore his memory through therapy and medical intervention have been unsuccessful. He has formed a new identity based on his experiences in the treatment facility, and exposure to his previous life could be psychologically traumatic. Erica listened to this explanation during a meeting at a military hospital where Marcus had been transferred from the secret facility, and she felt something inside her break that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with rage. Not only had military officials allowed her to believe her son was dead, they were now suggesting that his memory loss made family contact inadvisable. "I want to see him," Erica said, her voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that comes from years of bureaucratic stonewalling. "I want to see my son, and I want him to have the opportunity to decide for himself whether he wants contact with his family." The reunion, when it finally occurred 3 weeks later, was nothing like what Erica had imagined during 5 years of searching. Marcus looked like her son, older, thinner, with scars that spoke of the catastrophic injuries he had survived. But he looked at her with the polite confusion of someone meeting a stranger who claimed to know him. "I am sorry," Marcus said when Dr. Wells introduced Erica as his mother, "but I do not remember you. They tell me I had a life before I was injured, but I do not remember any of it. This is difficult for you, I am sure." The man sitting across from Erica in the hospital conference room had Marcus's face and Marcus's voice, but he was not the son she had raised. 5 years of memory loss and institutional living had created someone new, someone who was polite and careful and seemed to regard his own amnesia as a medical condition rather than a tragedy. Erica had brought photographs from Marcus's childhood, hoping they might trigger some recognition or emotional response. She showed him pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, his graduation from Army medical training, moments that had defined their relationship as mother and son. Marcus studied each photograph with the careful attention of someone trying to solve a puzzle, but there was no spark of recognition, no emotional connection to the images of a life he could not remember living. "I can see that I was loved," Marcus said after reviewing the photographs, "and I am grateful that you never stopped looking for me. But I need you to understand that the person in these pictures feels like a stranger to me. I do not feel like your son, even though I understand intellectually that I must be." The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Dr. Wells monitoring Marcus's emotional state, while Erica tried to find some way to connect with this polite stranger who shared her son's DNA, but none of his memories. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about his previous life, showed appropriate concern for the pain his disappearance had caused his family, but displayed no emotional investment in resuming relationships he could not remember forming. When the meeting ended, Marcus shook Erica's hand with the formal courtesy of someone concluding a business appointment and thanked her for the information about his past life. "Will I see you again?" Erica asked as Dr. Wells prepared to escort Marcus back to his treatment unit. "If you would like to visit, I would welcome that," Marcus replied. "I cannot promise that I will remember you as my mother, but I would like to learn more about the person I used to be." Over the following months, Erica made the drive to the military hospital every weekend, slowly building a new relationship with a son who was both familiar and foreign. Marcus was intellectually curious about his previous life, but he remained emotionally detached from the stories and photographs that Erica shared with him. The man her son had become was thoughtful, articulate, and deeply concerned about the impact his condition was having on his family. But he was also institutionalized in ways that went beyond his memory loss, accustomed to structured schedules, limited choices, and the kind of careful supervision that had governed his life for 5 years. "I understand that this is difficult for you," Marcus told Erica during one of their visits, "but I need you to understand that I am not the person you remember. The injury changed more than my memory, it changed who I am. I am not sure that trying to recreate our previous relationship is healthy for either of us." The comment forced Erica to confront a truth she had been avoiding throughout her 5-year search. She had been looking for the son she had lost, but the son she had found was someone different, someone shaped by experiences that had nothing to do with the life they had shared before his injury. But she also realized that her love for Marcus was not dependent on his ability to remember their relationship. She loved him not because he was the person he used to be, but because he was her child, regardless of what he could or could not remember about their shared past. "You are right," Erica told him during their next visit. "You are not the same person you were before your injury. But you are still my son, and I am still your mother, whether you remember that or not." I cannot make you remember our past, but I can be part of your future if you will let me. Marcus considered this carefully, as he seemed to consider everything before responding. I would like that, he said. Not because I remember you as my mother, but because I like who you are as a person. Maybe we can build something new instead of trying to recover something that is lost. The process of building a new relationship with her son was slower and more challenging than Erica had anticipated. Marcus required extensive support to transition from institutional living to independent life, and his amnesia made even basic decisions about his future complicated by his lack of connection to personal preferences and goals he could not remember forming. But gradually, over the course of 2 years, Erica and Marcus developed something that resembled a family relationship, though it was different from anything either of them had experienced before. Marcus moved into a supervised living facility near Erica's home, where he could receive ongoing medical support while gradually building independence and social connections. On a sunny afternoon in May 2025, Erica and Marcus sat together on a bench in the park where she had brought him as a child, though he had no memory of those earlier visits. Marcus was reading a book about neuroscience. He had developed an interest in understanding his own condition, while Erica worked on a crossword puzzle. Between them on the bench lay the folded American flag that had started Erica's 5-year journey to find her son. She had brought it with her today, not as a memorial to someone who had died, but as a reminder of everything she had been willing to sacrifice to bring Marcus home. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked, looking up from his book. Spending all those years searching for someone who turned out to be different from who you remembered? Erica considered the question while watching children play on the same playground equipment where Marcus had played 20 years earlier, during a childhood he could no longer remember. No, she said finally. I regret that you were injured. I regret that you lost your memories. I regret that we lost 5 years that we could have spent together. But I do not regret finding you, even if you are not exactly the person I was looking for. She reached over and touched the folded flag with gentle fingers. This flag was supposed to honor your death, she continued. But instead, it reminds me that love is not dependent on memory. I love you not because of who you used to be, but because of who you are now. You may not remember being my son, but I remember being your mother. And that is enough. Marcus closed his book and looked at the flag that had traveled with his mother through 5 years of investigation, legal battles, and ultimately reunion. Can I hold it? He asked. Erica carefully lifted the flag and placed it in Marcus's hands. He held it with the same reverence she had maintained throughout her search, understanding that it represented something important even if he could not remember what. Tell me again about the person I used to be, Marcus said quietly. Not because I think I will remember, but because I want to understand what you were fighting to save. And so Erica told him again about the boy who had wanted to be a doctor, about the young man who had joined the army to serve others, about the son who had called her from Afghanistan to tell her about the children he was helping. Marcus listened with the careful attention he brought to everything, trying to understand the life he could not remember and the mother who had refused to let him disappear. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park as they sat together, a mother and son rebuilding their relationship from scratch, united by love that transcended memory and sacrifice that had survived 5 years of official denial. Some battles, Erica reflected as she watched Marcus study the flag in his hands, are won not by recovering what was lost, but by accepting what remains and building something new from the pieces that survive. The flag would always remind her of the son she had thought she lost. But the man sitting beside her reminded her of something more important. That love is stronger than memory, that family is more than shared history, and that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to give up when everyone else insists that hope is pointless. Marcus might not remember being her son, but Erica would remember being his mother for both of them. And in the end, that was enough. The end.